You know that classic anti-drug PSA, right? This is your brain on drugs, with the egg sizzling in the pan. Well, it's time for an update. Picture this. This is your brain on TikTok. It's the same sizzle, maybe even the same potential for damage, just a different dealer. Because what the latest neuroscience is showing us, and it's kind of shocking, is that your brain on social media looks a whole lot like a brain on some seriously addictive substances.
So you might think you're just kicking back, killing some time, catching up with people, but what if I told you that behind that screen, some of the most sophisticated algorithms ever created are systematically hijacking your brain's natural reward systems, that they're creating a literal cycle of craving, and in the process, causing measurable, physical changes to the very structure of your brain? Yeah, this isn't just about wasting a few hours. This is about a fundamental rewiring of our neurology. Okay, let's get into it.
So here's what we're going to cover in this explainer. First, we'll look at the dopamine hijack, how these platforms get their hooks into your brain's pleasure chemical. Then we'll zoom in on the specific impact of all those short-form videos on our attention spans. After that, we'll get into the really wild stuff, the actual structural changes that can happen in the brain. We'll also explore this strange paradox where we feel lonelier even though we're supposedly more connected than ever. And finally, don't worry, we'll look at some science-backed ways you can start to break free and get your focus back.
All right, so how exactly do these apps get so sticky? How do they get their hooks into us so effectively? Well, it all starts with a single, incredibly powerful neurotransmitter. Okay, so this is the absolute core of it, and it comes from the work of Stanford psychiatrist Dr. Anna Lembke. Whenever we do something that feels good, our brain releases a little bit of dopamine. Nice, right? But when we get a huge, unnatural spike, like from the never-ending novelty of a social media feed, our brain panics a little and tries to rebalance things. But it doesn't just go back to normal. It overcorrects, and our dopamine levels dip below the baseline. This leaves you in what's called a dopamine deficit state, and that's the trap. It makes it harder to feel pleasure from normal, everyday things, and it leaves you craving another big hit from the app just to feel normal again. And check out this analogy. It's a powerful one. Think about how the hypodermic needle revolutionized drugs. It made them way more potent by delivering them straight into the bloodstream. Well, the smartphone is basically doing the same thing for digital dopamine. It delivers this endless, high-potency stream of super engaging content, all the bright colors, the sounds, the alerts, directly into our brain's processing centers. It's an incredibly efficient delivery system, which makes it incredibly hard to resist. And here is where the design gets really, really clever in a kind of sinister way. Research from places like Stanford and even from insiders at Meta has confirmed this. The biggest dopamine rush doesn't actually come from getting the reward, like getting a like or seeing a funny video. No, the biggest hit comes from the anticipation, the uncertainty. It's what's called a variable reward schedule, and it is the exact same principle that makes a casino slot machine so addictive. Your brain has no idea when the next reward is coming, so it stays locked in this state of craving, just compelling you to pull the lever again and again, or in our case, to just keep scrolling.
So now let's get a little more specific. How does this whole dopamine dynamic play out with the explosion of short-form video? Because this format, it turns out, has a really unique and powerful effect on our ability to think.
Researchers are starting to use this term TikTok brain. Now, it's not some formal medical diagnosis, but it describes a very real pattern they're seeing. See, our brains are incredibly adaptive. If you constantly bombard them with these super fast, novel, bite-sized bits of information, you're basically training your brain to prefer that kind of input. This can start to reconfigure your entire attentional system, making it way harder to tolerate boredom or engage in the kind of deep, focused thought you need for, say, reading a book or finishing a big project.
And look, this isn't just a vague feeling people are having. We can actually see it in brain scans. A recent EEG study had people do a task that required a lot of focus. The results were pretty stark. The people who showed a higher tendency toward short video addiction, well, they had less brain activity in their prefrontal cortex. That's the CEO of your brain, the part that's in charge of focus and self-control. And it was going quiet right when they needed it the most.
Okay, so these platforms affect our brain's function. They affect our attention. But this is where the findings get really alarming. We're now seeing evidence that this repeated activity isn't just changing how our brain works, it might be leading to actual physical changes in the brain's structure.
Yeah, some landmark studies are starting to reveal these physical alterations. We're seeing decreased activity in the parts of the brain that help us make smart decisions and control our impulses. And another really big study found that heavy social media use was linked to a smaller cerebellum, which is involved in attention. We're even seeing an increase in gray matter in some areas. Now, that might sound good, but researchers think it could actually be a sign that the brain is just working overtime, desperately trying to build more infrastructure to handle the constant, overwhelming flood of stimulation.
But hold on, we use these platforms to connect, right? I mean, our brains are literally wired for social connection. Well, this is where things get really complicated and lead to a very strange paradox of modern life.
We are, at our core, social animals. Connecting with other people releases dopamine, and that's a good thing. It's a survival mechanism that encourages us to build communities. But what social media platforms have done is they've tapped into this ancient, powerful wiring and put it on steroids. They've essentially drugified social connection, creating this amplified, artificial version that our brains can find absolutely irresistible.
This can lead to what researchers call parasocial relationships. These are those one-sided bonds we form with the creators and influencers we follow. And look, sometimes these relationships can be a genuine comfort. One study actually found that for people feeling hopeless, connecting with a creator they related to could improve their well-being. But that highlights the really crucial point here. It's a massive double-edged sword, because that exact same dynamic can also be really harmful. Another study directly linked higher YouTube usage in young adults with increased loneliness, anxiety, and depression. Why? Because when these online, one-sided relationships start to replace the real thing, they can actually stop us from developing the very face-to-face social skills we need to connect with people in the real world, which ironically can make us feel even more isolated.
So, while this picture can seem a little bleak, there is really good news. The brain's incredible ability to change, what we call neuroplasticity, the very thing that gets us into this mess, is also the key to getting out. Your brain actually wants to heal. So let's look at how we can help it do that.
According to Dr. Lemke at Stanford, the single most powerful thing you can do is a dopamine fast. That means a complete break. And a full month seems to be the gold standard. That's what it takes to really allow your brain's reward pathways to reset back to their natural, healthy baseline. I know it sounds tough, but doing this is what allows you to start actually enjoying simple, real-world pleasures again, without needing the constant hyperstimulation from a screen.
Now, if a full month-long fast just isn't realistic for you, a gradual reduction can also work wonders. The goal is to shift from mindless scrolling to intentional use. So first, just become aware. Track your usage, notice what triggers you to pick up the phone. Then, introduce a pause. Just a moment before you open an app to take a few deep breaths and ask yourself what you're really looking for. And finally, set some hard limits. One study found that about 30 minutes a day seems to be the sweet spot for mental health benefits. And we can also support this healing process on a biochemical level. While you're making these behavioral changes, you can give your brain the nutritional building blocks it needs to repair itself. Things like L-tyrosine can help your brain replenish its natural dopamine stores. Magnesium is amazing for calming that overactivated nervous system and helping you sleep, which is critical for repair. And adaptogens like rhodiola are natural substances that just help your body and brain become more resilient to the kind of stress that often makes us want to scroll in the first place.
So here's the ultimate takeaway. Your brain is defined by its ability to change. That's its superpower. The very same mechanisms that allow algorithms to hijack our attention and rewire our brains are the exact same mechanisms that allow us to heal, to recover, and to reclaim our own focus. The digital world isn't going anywhere, but by understanding what's going on up here, we can switch from being passively programmed by our feeds to actively shaping our own minds. So the final question really is, who do you want holding the blueprints?